And of course, beyond all of those experiences is going to be the ultimate beauty. Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal, right? So He's going to expose Himself, and we're going to get to meet Allah Azza wa Jal Himself in this remarkable way.
الرحمن
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Everybody, once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. We're almost at the end of the surah. Allah is going to give us the climax of this second level of Jannah by describing people now reclined again, sitting back again. And as I told you, it seems that the people of Ihsan, the ultimate reward for them is that they finally get to relax and not have to worry about pleasing their Rabb anymore. It also seems like a fitting conclusion to where the entire discussion of Jannah started. It started with they're afraid of standing in front of their master, and it ends with they are sitting back relaxed, right? So there's this really beautiful beginning and end to this entire conversation about Jannah. Now this description takes another turn. Allah says, "Ala rafrafin khudrin." So ittaka'a means to lean back, and this is another variation of this verb is tawakka'a, like atawakka'u alayha wa ahushu biha ala ghanami, right? With Musa alayhi salam, when he leans on his stick sometimes. And ittaka is to completely lean back. Your back is relaxed, and you can put your weight on whatever cushion you're sitting on or couch you're sitting on. So they're going to be sitting on a rafraf. Rafraf is actually delicate silks. So the last time we saw istabraq on the inside, and now we're seeing delicate silk materials on the outside. So this is basically your mattress cover, your cushion cover, your couch covers. That's what's being described as very delicate materials. And it's also something that's shiny. So it's got some kind of a level of sheen. Like you can think of it as like almost like a velvet, like a thin velvet, is the kind of seating that Allah is describing. But again, the color comes back. Rafrafin khudrin. It's green velvet. So really interesting. Again, this description of Jannah, the second levels of Jannah, were described starting with lush greenery, and now you're sitting in greenery. I also think of seating as, you know how we talked about bringing the inside out? So you're surrounded by greenery, and then your seating kind of matches the decor of the outside. You know, when we think of interior design or design in general, we have to decide whether we're designing for the inside or the outside, right? And the materials differ. So you cannot use delicate materials outdoors because the weather elements will destroy those materials. So you have to have tougher, weather resistant, water resistant, wind resistant, that kind of stuff outside. It's not going to go bad, right? If you take your most expensive sofa from the living room and put it in the backyard, it's going to be 3 days before it's destroyed, right? Covered in dust and all of it. But Jannah is a different life. We're outdoors, we're surrounded by greenery and waterfalls and all of it, and now we've got these cushions. And of course, this can also be describing the cushions that are inside of those tents that were just described. So the idea of hurun maqsuratun fil khiyam can be reinforced by muttaki'ina ala rafrafin khudrin. But it seems like this is some special other kind of seating where they're just seated, and maybe they're ready to entertain other guests, because the idea of rafrafin khudr is actually maybe kind of living room area where they're going to talk to somebody else. But Allah doesn't mention any other company. What's interesting though is the very next ayah Allah will talk about Himself. So there's a subtle hint whose company is about to take place. It's Allah's company. Now the thing is, when we enter into Allah's company, we enter into Allah's company with a very formal demeanor. We stand before Allah, we hold our hands, we humble ourselves, we come before Allah in the clothing of Hajj, and we say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. But in Jannah, you get to be relaxed in the company of Allah. This is new, right? This is a new experience with Allah that we haven't had before, because you've already met Allah's expectations. And now you get to be with Allah in this much more relaxed fashion. So متكئين على رفرف خضر. So this again some commentary on the word رفرف. وهو ما يبسط على الفراش لينام عليه. So this is the kind of spreading that's put on the bedding so you can sleep on it. Basically like bed sheets kind of thing or cushion covers. وهي تنسج على شبه الرياض ويغلب عليها اللون الأخضر. قال الجوهري الرفرف ثياب خضر تتخذ منها المحابس. This is also green coverings that you make awnings with, like beds have awnings and things like that. So they can this can be referring to that, but it's definitely referring to something that's widespread. That's one common meaning of the word rafraf. It's not just one, it's like laid out. So it's a large living area. If this was just about you and your seating, then you wouldn't see the word rafraf. So there's a vastness inside the meaning. So now moving on to abqari. So abqar, nowadays in modern Arabic, abqari is used for a genius. Right? So that's modern Arabic. It's العربية الفصحى المعاصرة. وليس هكذا في لغة العرب يعني منذ قديم. So العبقر والعبقرة من النساء المرأة التارة الجميلة, a very beautiful, uniquely beautiful, stunningly beautiful woman was actually called a عبقرة. Similarly, الطنافذ الثخان واحدها عبقرية والديباج, the very exotic imported rugs that have embroidery from another land, those were also called abqar. So right now we see a woman, the beauty of which you've never seen before, or rugs, the design of which you've never seen before because it's coming from outside, it's imported, that's abqar. Al-fakhir min al-hayawan wal-jawhar. This is actually also a very exotic animal. It can be called abqar. A very exotic jewel can be called abqar. ظلم عبقري, مال عبقري, رجل عبقري. كامل في صفته كأنه لا نظير له. All of a person, a man could be called abqari, money could be called abqari, a crime can also be called abqari, something you've never seen the likes of before. Something that you've never seen anything like it before. It's not perfection, it's unheard of, unseen, unimagined. You're seeing something you've never seen before. That's called abqari. So now there's an evolution in the language. You saw some kind of palm trees, you've never seen them before. Some kind of pomegranate, you've never seen them before. Nakhlun Rahman. Previously you saw there's some kind of fire, you've never seen that kind of fire before. Marijim min nar, it was nakira. So some kind of fire, we don't know what kind of fire that is. Now we're seeing beautiful, exotic things. And by the way, just because something you've never seen before doesn't mean it's good. Right? Like I keep telling you, I'm into interior design, that sort of thing. So sometimes when you go to these the home decor places, or designer places. There's the retail places, like you can go to like an IKEA or whatever, right? But then there's these specialized design places where they sell their corner pieces and vases and whatever. Some of those things are so ugly, like they're so ugly. And they're so expensive. There's like $8,000 for a broken pot because it represents the brokenness of the artist's soul or whatever, right? Or they'll have like this giant canvas painting and there's a blotch of paint, and it's a $20,000 painting because it represents chaos. Even though the guy hired a monkey to just throw paint at it, and then he's selling it to like, because it's abqari, definitely, it's never seen anything like it except in a painting accident, right? But it's not hisan, they're not beautiful, right? So just because something is abqari doesn't make it hisan, right? It's art. Yeah, it's art, but I have other words for it. So there's abqari, hisan together actually suggests now you're going to see things you've never seen before, but actually those things are more beautiful than you've ever seen before. What's interesting in the world of design, whether it's fashion design or architectural design or interior design, sometimes people just do weird stuff just because it's different. And everybody says, wow, that's amazing. Not because it's amazing, just because it's different. Right, just because somebody will design some weird shirt with like a collar or like a shoulder pad sticking out on the side like they're a space alien. And they're walking down wow, this is what I'm going to wear to work. And they like, just because and then of course this is not just a new thing. You know, kings, royalties, they used to wear the most ridiculous robes. Right? If you look at ancient kings and the kind of, they're wearing like these floral
and dragons and all this kind of stuff they're wearing, and they look absolutely absurd, but they look different from everybody else, right? Just because you got to be different, now this must be an amazing thing. This is the human desire for something abqari. Also, abqari, interestingly, وصف لما كان فائقا في صنفه عزيز الوجود اسم بلاد الجن في معتقد العرب. In Arab mythology and Arab poetry, Abqar was considered the land of the jinn, the world of the jinn. And why is that important? Because they thought jinns live in another world. So if you brought something from there, then you brought it from the land of the jinn. So if you see an imported item, then they'll call that item abqari. If we had a time travel machine and I took a phone, a smartphone, like an iPhone, back to Arabia, and I showed it to somebody, they would say, ooh, abqari, right? Because this is coming from some alien world. It's a place we've never seen before, right? So this word, it illustrates our desire for the imported. And it's interesting that even now, imported items are more expensive. Local items are not, right? And you go to, when you go to cities like if you go to Turkey, or if you go to like, Somalia, Pakistan, any Muslim countries, they have their own arts and crafts, right? Their local arts and crafts. And nobody there buys any of that stuff. Who buys this stuff? Tourists, because then they get to say, I have an imported item. Right, so they bring that stuff back. There's a Pakistani restaurant in Toronto that has a rickshaw inside it. There's actually one in Dallas too now. There's a rickshaw inside it. And the charpai, those beds that are made of straw, right? The one that you leave a nice imprint on your back if you sleep on them, right? They have that. They're sitting in the restaurant just because it looks exotic, like this is imported, right? A feeling from somewhere else. So Allah is describing now that we are in a part of Jannah where we're seeing things that nobody's ever seen before. And there's a beauty that's never been experienced before. It's a really profound way of ending the conversation about Jannah, because it's actually taking us from the things that we could kind of imagine. You can imagine waterfalls, you can imagine fruits, you can imagine couches, you can imagine green cushions, you can imagine that stuff. But by the time you get to abqariyin, this is now a different category. And it's abaqir. Abaqir is the plural. Abaqira. But it's not used. Hisan is plural. The adjective is plural. It's unique because in Arabic, if the noun is singular, then the adjective should be singular. But here the noun is actually singular, but the adjective is plural. So it's an unusual rhetorical device that's being used here, as if to suggest that each item will have multiple dimensions of beauty. Maybe the smell, maybe the sight, maybe the color, maybe every time you look at it from a different angle, a different beauty of it comes out. And what are these items? Are they food items? Are they lamps? Are they palaces? Are they people? What are they? We're not told. We're just told there's an untold kind of multi-dimensional beauty waiting for you as you sit back on these couches. See, previously you saw fruits and the fruits came down to you when you sat down, right? But fruits are still something ma'loof, something you know. Okay, I know what a fruit is. But now you're sitting back and you're like, whoa. Whoa, whoa, and you're just looking at these new, beautiful experiences. And of course, beyond all of those experiences is going to be the ultimate beauty. Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal, right? So He's going to expose Himself, and we're going to get to meet Allah Azza wa Jal Himself in this remarkable way. So فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And then finally, تَبَارَكَ اسْمُ رَبِّكَ ذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. This ayah, very heavy, very powerful conclusion to this surah. Tabaraka is, let me just roughly translate it for you. So in easy English, not really that easy English translation would be, blessed is the name of your master. Blessed is the name of your master. Dhil Jalali wal Ikram, the possessor of, Al-Jalal means greatness, glory, and Al-Ikram means generosity, the owner of greatness and generosity, right? So Allah's greatness will of course be manifest when the connection to what we just heard. Allah's greatness is finally manifest when we actually meet with Allah. And His generosity is being manifested throughout with all these different dimensions of His generosity that have been talked about. But we have to kind of take each piece of this at a time. The word tabaraka comes from the word birka, which is when water settles, or when a camel sits down and it won't move. That's actually called birka, when something gets settled and stays. The thing is, when you go somewhere exotic, and we've all been to some vacation somewhere that's not our normal, right? When you go somewhere exotic, you know you can't stay there forever. It's temporary, right? And now we're at the height of exotic. But this is not a temporary stay, this is permanent. This is permanent. It's also interesting that we saw gardens opening up, more gardens opening up, more gardens opening up, and you're exploring more and more, but now you're sitting and the world around you is changing. You're not even going anywhere, you're just in the same place, and your scenery keeps on changing, right? So there's this idea that you're settled and more is coming out. So al-birka, again, something for the camel to sit down. The other meaning, the important meaning of baraka is ثبات واستمرار مع لطف ومن ذلك البركة محركة النماء والزيادة. Something that's settled and something that keeps on growing. I like to, when I'm teaching this kind of vocabulary to kids, just so they understand the concept of barakah, you guys ever play Jenga blocks? Right? Jenga blocks, the taller the tower gets, the more unstable it gets, right? Now imagine a set of Jenga blocks, the more it grows, the more stable it gets. That would be barakah. It's something that's stable and gets more and more stable and keeps on growing also. Because anything else, the more it grows, the more unstable it gets. Right? And that's the human experience. Empires grow. And as they grow, they get weaker from within. The Roman Empire grew too big to be sustainable. They couldn't supply their military and their governorship, the resources they needed. They got stretched too thin. They broke apart. Right? So governments can become too big and then fail. Right? Businesses can become too big and fail. They're not able to maintain the quality anymore. That can happen. Right? The same way, by the way, masjids sometimes get too big and fail. Right? Small community, everybody was getting along, and then they got big, and now, mashallah, new kinds of fights, new kinds of drama, new kinds of board elections and all kinds of stuff. Allah protect our masajid from fitna. But that happens when there's no barakah. But barakah is something is growing, and as it's growing, it's also staying stable. Right? Both of those things together. Now Allah is saying, when we say, I hope Allah puts barakah in your work, Allah puts barakah in your family. We say these things, right? What we're saying is, I hope Allah gives your family growth, more, enhances them in rizq, in health, in good things, and also sustains that goodness. But that goodness doesn't make life unstable, right? So both of those things together is actually what barakah means. So now tabaraka means the thing that possesses barakah in it. Okay, so when Allah calls His name something that has barakah in it, that means when we call on Allah's name, we are trying to bring barakah into anything that we're doing. The thing that has the power to bring barakah in anything, stability and growth is actually Allah's name. And so He says, how full of barakah is the name of your master. The question though is, the name of Allah is Allah. And the word Allah has not been used in the entire surah. Right? But what's incredible, I told you this is why the first ayah is a section by itself. What was the first ayah of the surah? Ar-Rahman. And the last ayah of the surah says, blessed is the name of your master. You see how beautiful that is? This actually now taking us back to ayah number 1 and saying how incredible is that name. And it's so beautiful that whenever we want something to have blessings, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the center of those names is ar-Rahman, and then we do whatever we do to have barakat in it. Right? So Tabarak asmu Rabbika. How blessed is the name of your master. The name also means the description or the qualities. Actually, is something that we're going to read through all of these because they're really beautiful insights. وصفه تعالى بكمال البركة والبركة والخير العظيم والنفع تطلق البركة على علو الشأن, meaning Allah is now alluding to His greatness, that Allah is so great that even saying His name can bring goodness in your life. Like even just saying His name brings about goodness in your life. You know how people nowadays, there's a manifest positive energy. Manifest positivity. Stupid. Like, call on Allah's name. That's positivity. Don't if you just believe that the interview is going to go well, then it's just going to happen. No, when you can put barakah in what you're doing. Like they're talking about all these things that Allah has talked about. All they just do is remove Allah from the equation and then talk about it, right? That's all. Is all what they do. And then people are like, "Ustad, what do you think about manifesting positivity?" I'm like, can you read Fatiha, please? That's manifesting positivity. These fancy new things that are actually not fancy at all, and they're not new at all, and something so much better has been given to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? تنزيه وتقديس له تعالى فيه تقرير لما ذكر في هذه السورة الكريمة من آلائه جل شأنه الفائضة على الأيام. He's saying it's this name, it's as if, all this time, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. How many more wonders are you going to undermine? How many more wonders are you going to undermine? And every wonder of Allah is simply a manifestation of one of Allah's names. When you see a wonder of Allah, you're reminded of one of Allah's names and how blessed it is and how it creates what it creates. Like Allah is, Al-Qadir, the one who measures and controls, and you see the universe and you just see Al-Qadir, right? You see, Ar-Raziq when you see a fruit. You see Ar-Rahman and, Al-Wadud when you see a baby. You see Al-Wadud, the loving one. The love that a mother has and a father has for their child is actually coming from the source of all love, Al-Wadud. You see Allah's names manifest in everything around you. So actually, you're not just denying or losing out on the wonders of Allah. You're losing out on the names of Allah, right? Behind every wonder of Allah is a name of Allah. And Allah says in the end, whether you deny it or not, those names are full of blessings anyway. Right? تبارك اسم ربك. So now إشارة إلى أن الباقي والدائم لذاته هو الله تعالى لا غير والدنيا فانية. So it's coming back to that same idea. The world is going to end, and the only thing that's going to remain, that's going to stay and continue to, its power continues only to grow, is actually the name of Allah. That's the only thing that stays forever. Which is actually interesting, because the last time we heard this kind of concept was كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Right? So it's the same kind of idea being reinforced at the end with similar language. إشارة إلى أن أتم النعم عند الله وأكمل الذات ذكر الله تعالى. This is Allah saying, as if Allah saying, the greatest blessing a human being can have is to mention Allah's name. Like, just to be able to mention Allah's name is one of the greatest blessings you and I can have. I talked about this when I was teaching Surah Al-Insan, but it sticks with me. It hits me every time I talk about it. It's like, we just got to keep thinking about it. I often say that the universe, the known universe, is about 13.9 billion years. Billion light years. So that means light, we know how fast light is, takes 13.9 billion years to reach us from the vast ends of and it's still expanding. This is what we know so far. And the sun is so far from us that the rays of the sun reach us in 8 minutes. I mentioned that before, right? But this is just the first sky. How many skies are there? There's 7 skies, and Allah is above the 7 skies, right? And the angels that are, doing tawaf around the arsh, right? All of that is beyond the 7 skies. And the first sky, this 13.9 billion years, is like a ring in the desert compared to the second sky. And that second sky is a ring compared to a desert in the third. You guys know that hadith, right? So all the way to the 7th. And we know that the speed of light, as fast as it is, isn't fast enough to cover the distance of the universe in the way that, there are, you may be seeing a star right now in the sky that's already died billions of years ago. But you're seeing its light because it took that long to get here, and by the time it gets to you, the star's already dead, right? But much slower than the speed of light is the speed of sound, isn't it? I mean, there are jets that fly faster than the speed of sound, right? They break the sound barrier. Okay, when I make dhikr of Allah, when I just say Alhamdulillah, it's sound, isn't it? And this sound, in that very moment, travels all 7 skies and reaches Allah. And Allah responds. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Right? That is the power of the name of Allah. تَبَارَكَ اسْمُ رَبِّكَ. Right? The way that it reaches to Allah beyond the skies, because there's a connection between us and Allah that is greater than this entire universe. So if you just think about that and then think about what does it mean to just mention Allah's name? What does it mean to just do dhikr of Allah? Just the way you think of the words Subhanallah or La ilaha illallah or Allahu Akbar or reciting an ayah of the Quran. Whew, it changes. The universe becomes small compared to the word of Allah. The universe becomes small, you know? So then, أنه تعالى ذكر جميع اللذات في الجنات ولم يذكر لذة السماع وهي من أتم أنواعها فقال متكئين على رفرف خضر يسمعون ذكر الله تعالى. He says he mentioned all the pleasures of Jannah. He didn't mention hearing. He didn't mention hearing. Things to see, things to taste, things to touch, but not hearing. One of the senses is missing. And he says finally they're sitting back and they're remembering Allah, or they're getting to talk to Allah, the ultimate pleasure, hearing Allah Himself. Subhanallah. And what a correspondence. The surah began with us talking to Allah, or Allah talking to us in the Quran, and we're ending with Allah talking to us in Jannah. You know, this is mind-blowing what's happening inside the surah. So, تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال تبارك بمعنى على فمن على اسمه كيف يكون مسماه. He says, Tabaraka means how high, how lofty, how grand Allah's name. And he says, if the name is so grand, how must He be? That's just His name. Then how must He be? And you know, in this dunya, we get to say His name. But in the next life, we get to experience not just His name, but we get to experience Him. We get to experience Him. So, these are just some of the things. بمعنى دام الخير عنده فهو إشارة أن ذكر اسم الله تعالى يزيل الشر ويهرب الشيطان ويريد الخير ويقرب السعادات. وأما إن قلنا بمعنى دام اسم الله فهو إشارة إلى دوام الذاكرين في الجنة. Allah. He says, this word is so powerful that now we know that just by saying this word, all these shayateen that were helping their kuffar friends, those shayateen can't do anything to you because what you have with you is so much more mighty. It's the word of Allah that you have. And then on top of that, he adds this eternal nature of the name of Allah, the foreverness of Allah's name. The people who carry it, Allah gives them foreverness in Jannah. Right? So there's a connection being made in the lasting nature of Allah's name and the lasting joys of Jannah. They've been tied together just by Tabarak Asmu Rabbika Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. Okay. Now, this I've covered already. So now, I'm going to show you something more, and we're going to wrap it up. So this is two descriptions of Jannah, yeah? Two descriptions of Jannah. We started with gardens, springs, and fruits. That's clear to everybody? Okay? And then we saw comfortable seating and service. Okay? And then we saw treasure-like spouses. So we see three components, right? The gardens, the springs and fruits, comfortable seating, and then treasure-like spouses. Then we saw again in the second set, gardens, springs, and fruits. Again, mudhammatan, aynani naddakhatan, fakihatun wa naqlun wa rumman, same thing. And then we saw a change in the order, perfect spouses, but luxurious surroundings. So we have the same elements with a slight change in the order, right? That's what we have. What's interesting also though is at the top of it we saw the fear standing before their Rabb. So Allah was mentioned. Then in the middle, he said, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَى الْإِحْسَانِ. You did ihsan to Allah, Allah is doing ihsan to you. So now Allah is mentioned in the middle. And then at the end, blessed is your Rabb's name. Right? So this forms the pillars of this entire discussion, and it's organized in this way. It starts with Allah, it centers with ihsan, and it ends with Allah. Right? And these are both of these sections. Now, the final section of the surah, when we talked about this last Jannah, really interesting. It started with ihsan. هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان. Okay? And it ended with عبقري hisan. And we said then too, Allah's ihsan is something we can't imagine, and He ended with stuff we can't imagine. Right? Ihsan and hisan correspond to each other. Then He talked about how we walk into something that's mudhammatan, lush green. And what do you remember about the seating? That it was lush green. And that leaves the middle luxuries, which are water and food and the spouse. That comes in the middle. And that forms the final description of Jannah towards the end of the surah. So now I've given you kind of a view of each of the pieces of the surah. And of course, the final section is just Allah's blessed name. That's a section by itself. Tabarak asmu rabbika wal jalali wal ikram. But let's look at the entire surah now. The whole thing from the beginning, okay? So that we started with Ar-Rahman, everybody knows that. Then the greatest guidance, which is Allama al-Quran. The greatest creation, Khalaqa al-Insan. And the greatest ability, Allamahul Bayan. Fine. Then we saw the temporary perfection and beauty of this world. Ash-Shamsu wal-Qamar, right? Wan-Nakhl, and then Lahul Jawar. All of that was the temporary beauty and perfection of this world. Make sense so far? Okay. Then we saw everyone is dead. Kullu man alayha fan. And Allah remains. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Then we see that criminals are going to face their reckoning. We'll free ourselves up for you. Run if you can. You're going to get shot down. You're going to get grabbed. This is Jahannam. Right? All of that is criminals facing their reckoning. Right? Then fearing being brought back to life before Allah. وَمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. The one who feared being brought back in front of Allah. That was mentioned next. Then we find the endless perfection of the next world. We get a view of Jannah, the branches and all of that stuff that we read about. And then finally we get the greatest rewards associated with Al-Ihsan, meaning the upgraded Jannah. That's the greatest version, right? Where everything was enhanced. And finally you see Allah's blessed name, Tabarak asmu rabbika dhul jalali wal ikram. Okay, so let's look at this again. This is a quick run through the entire Surah Ar-Rahman, right? So now let's look at it again. We started with Ar-Rahman and we ended with the blessed name. You see the connection, it's so obvious, right? We see the greatest guidance, the greatest creation, and the greatest ability, and we end with the greatest kinds of rewards, right? We see the temporary perfection and beauty of this world, and on the flip side, we see the endless perfection and beauty of the next world. We see everyone is dead. Everyone, and only Allah remains. And on the other hand, you're fearing being brought back to life after you're dead. And you have to stand in front of Allah and face Him, literally face Him. And it said actually Allah's face will remain, and on Judgment Day you have to face Allah, right? And in the middle of the surah, you have the criminals have to face their reckoning. How incredible, right? How just absolutely marvelous that everything just converges. Subhanallah. This is the study of the nazm of the Quran, the order and the structure of the Quran. So whenever I do a study of a surah, I like to understand the order and structure of that surah. There are people that are doing work on this other than myself also. This was my own, but I've done a bunch my own, but some of my students really took this from me. I taught a course or two on this subject, the organization of the Quran, and they really picked it up, and they're doing quite a bit of work on this too themselves. Fascinating stuff, and it really gives us insight into how to make connections in the Quran and do taqabul, right? Which ayah corresponds to which ayah and how we can look at them in light of each other, right? So the goal of doing this is actually, we should study the Quran individual ayah, the larger subject, the coherence of the subject, but also be able to see how Allah beautifully organizes His words, right? The one who organized, like Farahi used to say, the one who organized every star in the sky and every bone in my body, why would He not organize His own word, right? So, and we start feeling like, oh, the subject is jumping from here to there, or it's going, I can't imagine human speech being this meticulously organized. And especially, I can't imagine somebody who speaks, just speaks, not writes, right? Would organize in this fashion. And if you remember, when we were doing the piece about the world or the piece about the criminals in the afterlife, each of those pieces had its own organization. This is the overview organization, but each piece had its own structure within it, right? So there's an intricacy within the intricacy within the intricacy that's very beautiful to appreciate. So this, what I'm going to do now that I've completed the study of Surah Ar-Rahman with you guys, I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's happening with this series, what I'm hoping to do, and what, inshallah, I think you can take advantage of. And then we're going to finish up today by talking about a couple more lenses. Remember we talked about lenses yesterday? So I want to talk to you about a couple more lenses and we'll call it a night, okay? So my goal, inshallah, is to complete this kind of a commentary on the entire Quran. That's my goal, inshallah ta'ala. So every time I go to a community, I take on a new surah. So I'm not going to do a lecture on Surah Ar-Rahman again, inshallah. The next project is Surah Al-Waqi'ah, and then the next one after that is Al-Hadid. And alhamdulillah, I've already done Surah
Al-Mujadala before, so I'll move on to Surah Al-Hashr, etc. So every month I spend about 3 weeks with my team studying the next surah, and then a Quran week. Then 3 weeks studying the next surah, and then a Quran week. And the crazy thing is, those 3 weeks, I think I'm ready after 3 weeks of study and about 100 hours. But when Quran week starts, I realize I'm not ready at all. So then, like this week, I've been basically all day I've been studying for the evening's lecture, just going over notes. Because studying is one thing, being able to present this stuff to you guys in a way that's going to make sense to you, that's a big challenge, right? So I hope I did some justice to that. You were able to grasp some of the lessons from this surah. But I want you guys to actually take advantage of all the hard work myself and my team are doing. And I want you guys to become students of the Quran and take whatever I'm doing. I'm not saying we have the best understanding of the Quran. What I am saying is, you know how you have video games and you have a walkthrough, right? We're trying to create a Quran walkthrough, right? So you get the walkthrough, and then you're doing your own study. You evolve yourself, and you can move on and do much, much more, right? My hope is our work is basic, like for the next generation. This is basic. And what they're doing is much more than that. And then what they leave behind is basic for the generation after that. So we've seen generations that have declined in their knowledge of the religion, right? But now it's time for us to lift it back up, right? And to give access to the general public. I'm hoping, especially college students, I see a lot of, mashallah, I see a lot of young men and women in their 20s, teens that are here, especially you guys. I want you to develop a curiosity in Quranic studies. I want you to this is our book, guys. It's our book. And and you're reading translation, like, I don't understand it. I have a hard time relating to it. And that's why I don't even know. Stop with the attitude. Stop being lazy. Stop making excuses. And give the book what it deserves. Give it your time. Give it your focus. Tomorrow I'll talk to you about where to begin and how to do that stuff, right? If you want to take advantage of my efforts, how do you do that in a systematic way? Like, you can find 30-second clips of anyone on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever. I don't even know how I'm not on TikTok, but I am on TikTok apparently. So, so yeah, everybody's on TikTok, but that's not study. That's just, I'm just going to share this with my friends and feel like I've served Islam, right? So, but that's not learning. That's not learning. So, but I'd like you to become lifelong learners of the Quran. And I hope that this week you got a taste of what that can do for you. Like, it changes your relationship. When you change your relationship with the Quran, you change your relationship with Allah. And at the same time, you change your relationship with yourself. You change your relationship with the world around you. All of that starts changing, right? It's the most beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful thing. And I want that for you. So inshallah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But today, let me get to your at least third lens. So why don't you guys remind me what was the first lens? First lens was language. The second lens was the world of the Quran. The world of the Quran. And then the third lens is going to be my world. Actually, my own world. Okay? Now, what does that mean, my world? Well, I'm studying Surah Rahman, and I have to ask myself, what does that mean for me? Okay, I know what world it wants me to go into. Well, at the end of it, this is a book that's talking to me. It's telling me something. It has a message for me. And I have to have the attitude that everything I learn in the Quran, at the end of it all, it needs to be a commentary on my life in some way, shape, or form. So how is it a commentary on my life? I want to be able to answer that question comprehensively for you today in a few minutes. The thing is, let's get away from slogans. That's the first thing I'll say. We have to learn everything in the Quran and we have to put it to practice. Who said? Who said? Where did you get this from? That you have to put the Quran into practice. There are some things in the Quran you have to put into practice. I get it. There are many things in the Quran you cannot put into practice because they're not calls to action. The Quran sometimes demands action. Sometimes it demands thought. Sometimes it demands a change in attitude. Sometimes it demands contemplation about something.
Sometimes it demands just thinking deeply about yourself. Sometimes it means developing a sense of gratitude, a sense of patience. That's not necessary. And sometimes there is action. But when we say we have to put everything in action, okay, let's do it. Alif Lam Mim. Action. What are you going to do? But Alif Lam Mim does teach me an attitude. I can't know everything. So now I'm comfortable with my ignorance. I'm okay. It doesn't hurt my pride to say I don't know. And if once I know that, then even the ayat that I think I know, right? Even the ayat that I think I understand, I should keep the door of humility open and say, I thought I understood it, but now that I learned something more, I realize I didn't. Right? So it's an orientation. One of the ways you can contemplate Quran through your own lens, the lens of your own life, is actually how can I turn this ayah into a dua? That's a really nice, easy way to start. So let's say you're reading Al-Baqarah and you're reading ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This book has no doubt in it, right? Even in easy English translation, there's no doubt in this book. How do I turn that into a dua? Tell me, how do you turn that into a dua? Ya Allah, remove all doubts from my heart. Ya Allah, let me never have any doubts about this book. Get rid of all doubts from my heart. Hudal lil muttaqeen. It's a guidance for people that have taqwa. What's an easy dua? Ya Allah, make me from the muttaqeen so that I can become a person that gets its guidance. Isn't that easy? So you're reading and you can start making dua. Okay, well, what happens when you're reading a story? Like Ibrahim alayhi salam is being thrown in the fire. How do I make that into, Ya Allah, don't let me get thrown in the fire? Think a little deeply. How do you make Ibrahim being thrown in the fire into a dua? Yeah. Ya Allah, doesn't matter how much pressure comes, when I'm under pressure and I feel like I'm about to be thrown in some kind of fire, social fire, economic fire. Fires take different forms, right? Ya Allah, just make those fires cool for me. Just like you did for Ibrahim alayhi salam. You understand what I'm saying? So now you start seeing yourself as you're studying, as you're learning, you start seeing yourself and you start applying your experience to it. Now, there's the warning side of this. This is really important. I said this when I was giving story night here. Like, don't project your experience on the Quran. Like, don't say, you know what, I feel like I relate to Yusuf alayhi salam so much, like he went through so much and I've been through so much and like we have this connection. You know what that is? That's main character syndrome. Okay, he's the main character of the story and you want to be the main character of your story. But when you read about the brothers of Yusuf, then you're like, yeah, I know a lot of Yusuf brothers in my life. Because they're not the main character, so they can't be about you. You have to be like Yusuf. You're the Yusuf of your story. You can't be the brothers of your story. You can't be the minister of your story. You can't be the minister's wife of your story. You can't be the guy in prison of your story. You have to be the Yusuf of your story. You know what that is? You're projecting your own experience and your own desire onto the Quran. If I'm being honest, I have to look at every character, every person, even Fir'aun, and say, do I have a little bit of Fir'aun in me? A little bit? I mean, Fir'aun, for example, when he heard a clear argument from Musa alayhi salam, one of the things he said is, Ma Rabbul Alameen, whatever, what God? Is it sometimes when people confront me about something serious, I just dismiss it? Do I have that tendency, like, whatever, I don't want to talk about this. Please, block. I'm not Fir'aun, but it's Fir'aun-ish, right? I can see if I'm really honest, I can start seeing some of my tendencies in maybe even in uncomfortable places. It's not always, a spiritually fulfilling. Sometimes it's a look in the mirror, right? So that is contemplating the Quran with my lens, my own experience. What have I experienced? And that also makes me question or ask Allah questions. Like, for example, when we talked about women in Jannah or the Hur in Jannah, right? As a female, you have to ask yourself, what does that make me feel and why? And what does Allah want me to think about this? Allah gave this book to men and women. He didn't just give it to men. I can't know what you feel when you read these ayat. I can't. There's no way I can do that. But you're Allah's slaves. You're going to stand in front of Allah on Judgment Day. And this is and you have to contemplate. You have to deeply contemplate. What is it that this is talking about? One of the sisters, I asked this young lady, she's just finished her hadith, master's degree in hadith. And I asked her, what do you feel when you read these ayat? And she said, I feel happy for men. That's all she said. She said, I feel happy for men. I was like, what do you feel about yourself? She says, I feel happy I'm not a man. Like, Allah made this for men, and Allah made something else for me. That's all I feel. I was like, okay, that was surprisingly easy. Now, if the rest of the planet can get on board, you know? So, this is actually a very, very important lens for you to develop. It'll really beautify. Again, each one of these lenses has a value. Somebody asked a very important question about the lens of language. Like, I don't know Arabic, what am I supposed to do? Well, yeah, I know. You're stuck with me. Like, my job is kind of relevant because there's not enough resources available that bridge the gap between the Arabic sources and people that speak English. If there was enough material available that's easily accessible, then this service wouldn't be relevant, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is to bridge that gap a little bit, right? This is your stepping stones into getting a taste of the language, so that I think if you study enough Quran with me, you're going to get restless and say, I want to read that myself. You're going to start getting mad. And the moment you get mad, that's when you achieve greatness. When you get sad, you achieve nothing. Oh, I don't know Arabic. So sad I don't know it. You will achieve nothing. But when you say, I don't know Arabic, I can't do this anymore. That's it. I'm doing this. You will get, pardon the language, you will get pissed off for greatness. Okay? You will get angry. That's when you'll put your foot down, you'll get it done. Right? And that's actually what I want you to develop, a level of frustration. If he can do it, sitting in Queens, like on a bus, on the Q70, he could do it on the F train. Like, honest to God, if I can do it in the 90s in New York with no internet, right? Well, if I can do it taking trains to Brooklyn to ask a question about one word from an imam because he's an Arab, and I'm waiting until Maghrib because he shows up, and then people are talking to him in Arabic, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, I don't understand anything. I was like, ما هذه الكلمة? And then he starts talking in Arabic, and I'm like, but I start writing stuff down. It was frustrating, but I did it. Yeah. So I want you guys to learn proper Arabic. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. How to use, for those of you that are interested, especially الجالية العربية هنا. أعرف أن الجالية العربية كبيرة جدا في نيوجيرسي. ويعني لديكم مسؤولية كبيرة جدا جدا جدا. I'm really glad we got a chance to study the surah together. Tomorrow we're going to do a little bit of practice. So I want you to read the surah yourself tonight and tomorrow. And actually, I'm going to spend about an hour with you taking your tadabbur from this surah. You're going to share what you reflected on. I shared some of my reflections and some of the reflections of my team. But as you're reading, you're going to look at if you can't look at the language lens, maybe you'll look at the world of the Quran lens, maybe you'll look at the my world lens. So you see something in the surah that I can't see because I'm not from your world, you're from your world, right? So you're going to see something that only you can see, right? And we're going to share some of those reflections together tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, too, and then finish up all the other lenses. And you'll have, hopefully you have the tools now to get started with other surahs of the Quran. بإذن الله تعالى. So I'll wrap up with that. بارك الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.